So it's all to play for still.
I think so. Do you want to bet against us?
Everybody, and welcome to For the Love of Paul McGrath podcast. That's what happens when you forget to click the button, put yourself up on screen. How's everyone doing? Friday evening, 14th of July, and delighted to be here to talk to everybody that took the time out of your day to listen. I do have a small request for you guys. I am going to be using the comments an awful lot more this afternoon. So please, if you do have any comments, if you do have any views on Brennan Johnson, please pop them in the comments as we go through here. And I'd love to get your views on them, because I'm going to be really honest. I can't make up my mind as to whether he's going to be the superstar or not. And I can obviously see his talent. Like, don't get me wrong. Let's start off hot. So I can see that he's got talent. I can see that he had a good season last season. The guy was really clinical. I'm going to show you some maps in a moment with regards to his shots. He's seriously clinical, and he scored goals from areas that I think that we've gotten the ball into before. But I just have reservations about one or two other things in his game, which is absolutely fine, I think, as well. But we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it as we go through it. Just wanted today was an interesting day. Today was an interesting day on social media. I've just, the reason I say that is not because of any of the DMs that I got or anything, but the account, for whatever reason, seems to have, like, there's just endless supply of people from Turkey following my Twitter account. Some, like, all of them into cryptocurrency for whatever reason, and I've no idea where the hell they're coming from. So if one of you guys are playing a prank on me, I'm absolutely loving it, because there's so many people from Turkey following my account for whatever reason this morning. But anyway, that's neither here nor there, and that's not what we're talking about. But it has been an interesting day on that platform, which seems to be going to absolute wreck and ruin. As I've said before, Threads isn't available in Ireland at the moment, isn't available in the EU, but we'll stay on Twitter anyway, and we'll keep going there, because it's a lovely place, and I get to talk to all you guys there. So I do still love it. There's just some weird and wonderful things that happen on that application from time to time. Anyway, Brennan Johnson, I'm going to come to your comments first, because I'm hoping that some of you guys have popped in comments about him already, because I want to get your views on him first. And then what we'll do is we'll have a little discussion about him with regards to your comments. If you've got any questions for me on him and I can answer them, and I have a varied opinion on him, absolutely, I would love that. So pop them in there into the comment box, and we'll start off with that first. And then I'll share up my customary slide deck as well, and we'll have a little conversation about him afterwards, because I think what happens, he's, like, don't get me wrong, as I said before, he's a good player, but I think he's a player that I think obviously he splits opinion. I see that on Twitter anyway. That's not a massive surprise to anybody, or to me anyway, on it. But I think he's a player that a lot of players looked at. A lot of people say, okay, he scored 8 goals, had 3 assists in a poor team last year. And that's a valid point. That is a valid point. And his goals are something I really enjoy about him. It's just other parts of his game that I think, if he comes to Aston Villa and we saw him for 90 minutes week in, week out, I think we'd start saying, oh my God, I wish I could see more of him. Now, obviously, on the flip side of that, he's just turned 22. Jesus, when I was 22, I certainly didn't have the get up and go that this kid has. Didn't have anywhere near like the ethic that this guy has. So far be it for me to criticize anybody in that point of view. But and I understand all that context that's involved. But when we're looking at what's happening, I suppose, with Aston Villa Football Club and where we're going, and I do have to bring up that bad word of the allocation of the funds to where we need to go, I suppose, this season. And considering we only have one striker in the team at the moment, and Brennan Johnson, if he comes in here, will be used as a winger / striker at times. I think it's right to just have a conversation about him, and it's not, as I've always said before, I'm not here to tell anybody their opinion. I'm here to talk about players. People come to me and ask me what my opinion is on it, and I give my opinion on it. And some people go, "Oh my god, I didn't know that about the player," and that's fine. And I love doing that, and I will continue to do that until the day I get sick of it, or die, whichever comes quicker. But as I say, I think this is one of the first people that we've come to that, because everybody has seen so much of him over the last season, it incites a really nice conversation, should I say? And it's a shame that I can't get 4 or 5 people up here on the screen to come and chat with me. Well, I could get 4 or 5 people to come up on the screen and to chat to me, and discuss about him, and in depth, I suppose. And maybe we might do that. I don't know. I don't know how we would do it, but we'll see how things go. If somebody has a really really good opinion and wants to come up on screen, why not fucking try it? I'm out of ideas and what else to do. So anyway, let's have a look at some of your comments there. Where are we? Rachel says she loved your Q&A last time. Did I do a Q&A? I did. Yes, I did. I've been heavily medicated for the last few days that I've been doing this podcast. So some of the rants that I've got on have been they've been fun to listen back to the next day. But yeah, so Shootings Tweed says, I think maybe Emery will get the best out of him. And look, you know what? I have no reason to believe that he won't get the best out of absolutely every player that we sign, because he's done it throughout his whole career. But if I'm signing a check for 50 million, that's not something I take into account. I take into account if he wants him, don't get me wrong. I take into account if Unai Emery wants him, hell, have at it. But kind of going, if you've got reservations on a player and you have to cross your fingers and hope that the manager can make him a 50 million pound player when maybe you think he's only a 30 million pound player. And look, I'm playing the cash semantics here. I don't care what we spend on him if he becomes a success, put it that way. And that's the shit part about transfer fees being known. I wish we didn't know what transfer fees we spent on players, because it clouds my judgment, it clouds everybody's judgment, it clouds the media's judgment, it clouds a full stadium's judgment, and people get right down on people's backs. If we didn't know what Aston Villa spent on players in the past, I think that some players might have been given more time and some players might have been given less time, based on what the club's outlay on them. And this is a real tangential kind of conversation that I'm having with regards to this. But I'd love to play a season or 2 or 3 whereby you didn't know what players were signed for, and see if attitudes to players changed. Because I'm going on this conversation right now, and this is me. Look, if you guys don't know me now, sometimes I talk myself into positions, I talk myself out of positions. Sometimes I contradict myself. Sometimes I come across as being hypocritical, because and sometimes I come across as sitting on the fence. And the reason being is that I don't have a fully formed opinion on Brennan Johnson at the moment. And what I went down on here was I started talking about, I don't know, but I spent 50 million on him. And then the back of my brain started going, hold on a minute. If you didn't know he was worth 50 million and Aston Villa brought him in, and what would his play be consequent for you to actually enjoy watching him play? And would he be beneficial for the team? And it's very difficult to extrapolate both of those when I suppose you're making a determination on a player. But yeah, so sorry for getting into my own little murmurings of my own mind. This is what happens when Paddy isn't here. This is what happens. I've no one to interject and tell me to shut up at times. But the remote property flipper says he's decent and definitely has potential. I love his pace, but definitely not as good as others we've been linked with. I think that's probably fair. I think he hasn't done as much as others we've been linked with. I think is probably the way I would say it. Like, people make the argument, and it's a valid argument. Once again, when I say people make the argument, I'm not belittling what they're saying, okay? And I'm not out trying to make everybody happy either. Conversation is that two people can walk away from a conversation and go, yeah, I didn't really agree with what he said, but at the end of the day, he's a sound chap. But some people might say that Brennan Johnson is a surer thing than like a Diaby or a Charles Le Catelere that we spoke about last night. And on the face of it, you're probably right based on the fact that those two players haven't played in the Premier League. But Moussa Diaby has played at a high level consistently for the last 5 years and done it to great aplomb. And he's a year older than Brennan Johnson. So at what line do you kind of say somebody has done it and is 1 year in the Premier League enough? And that's actually where I want to start my conversation and my point on Brennan Johnson. I can see that he's a talented player, and he does some things really well. I can see other things that I think he's naive in. He's a 22-year-old player. You would expect that. Um, and my argument always with Brennan Johnson has been, I'd love to see him do it for another 6 months in the Premier League, to be sure. But Aston Villa don't have that luxury. We don't have that luxury. I think if Brennan Johnson had another 6 months like he had in the Premier League last season, his price tag would not go up any further. I think if Brennan Johnson scored 30 goals between now and Christmas, that's the only way you see his price tag go up in this Forest team. Because the jump from 50 million, that's the rumored price that you're looking for. And this goes for any team. This goes for Aston Villa players as well. This goes for, if you want to talk about Ollie Watkins, teams. Manchester United were apparently linked with or interested in Ollie Watkins at the start of the season. We were at the start of the transfer window. We were saying, yeah, look, 50, 60 million maybe might get him. Ollie Watkins, unless he scores a bag load of goals in a short space of time, will not, like he did at the end of last season, will not be worth any more than he's probably worth now. And I think the same goes for Brennan Johnson. But because of Brennan Johnson having 1 year in the Premier League, my cautious element to it would be, I'd love to see another 6 months to see if he could emulate this again, or is the cat out of the bag for next year when teams come up against him and start to mark him. I just think it's a valid question. We're going to talk about another player as well that I would have. I like that. I think a lot of people liked. He did a lot of good things, and then got a big move, and the league seemed to have found him out, I suppose, after he got his big move, and we'll speak about him in a moment when we get to it. But I'm going to come back to some of your comments there. The AVFC faithful, good to see you, lads. They said, I think he'd be great as a sports striker. Him and Diaby would be great as our attacking signings. Yeah, like I'm not averse to him coming into Aston Villa at all. And I think as that second striker for Ollie Watkins, wow, if we had the two of them and we had if we had the two of them up top, we would have a serious counter press, because Brendan Johnson can counter press. That's for sure. Tom, good to see you. He says, like the look of Johnson, very direct. Now with Emery, I have no problem anybody coming in as long as they're willing to work. He'll get them to another level. Very good. And Michael Huggins says he's good, but I'm thinking of his cost to a more established player at a similar cost. And a lot of the threads that I've spoken about here, I'm just going down through the comments and I'm seeing these for the first time now. I'm seeing these in the comments as well. So, I think the conversation does revolve around 3 or 4 separate pieces, I think, for sure. Owen says, sounds like it's a large fee if the reports are to be believed. And Rachel says, if Forest want 50 or 60 million, then it's too much. Like a lot of the conversations are with regards to price. And that's where I try and stop myself, especially when I'm looking at the footage of him on my scout, or maybe when I'm looking at the statistics, because like the statistics don't make nice reading for him at all. But then again, the statistics for every single Newcastle player on the attacking side of the ball don't look good either. So they were not a ball dominant team last season. When you see him playing for Wales, and actually today I didn't watch them last night when I was putting together these slides, but today I did take a look at his time at Wales. And Wales at the international level are a bit more ball dominant. Now, they're not Brazil in the 70s or anything like that, but they can keep the ball, and they're not predicated on overloads to one side and having Brennan Johnson streak out to the right-hand side, loads of space, try and get the ball out to him as quick as possible and let him run the ball, because they did that quite a lot last year in Nottingham Forest. And Brennan Johnson basically kept his powder clean out on the right hand side and got into the back post and scored some really, really good goals, goals for Nottingham Forest at opportune times, albeit they were against teams that were in the lower half of the table. But he got points. His goals got them points against teams that they needed to get points against, if that makes sense. In the mini league that they were playing at the bottom of the table, he got goals against teams that were really beneficial to the club. So as part of a player's development, and another thing I saw on Twitter as well today was, I'm sure he only scores against shit teams. First of all teams in the Premier League are good. There isn't a shit team in the Premier League. We see it every single year. Yes, we might have one team that finishes rock bottom and is a bit porous. But for a team like Forest to come up and make 20 whatever changes, 22, however many players they brought in, for them to stay up in the league, and for Brennan Johnson to score 8 goals in and amongst the team that had zero fluidity in it, There's something in that I think that needs to be taken from a context point of view. Even if there were only goals against teams around him, like he didn't bang in a hat trick against Man City at the Etihad, or he didn't score a last minute winner against Arsenal. Who cares? Because at the end of the day, he's a 21-year-old kid playing in the Premier League after one full season in the Championship. And he got the goals that Forest needed to keep them in the Premier League and potentially kick on this season. So context is king, I suppose, when you think about it a lot like that. But as you say, Rachel, once again, I talk myself around in circles. It is going to be a price tag game with him. It really is going to be a price tag game because it's going to hang around him like the sword of Damocles. It really is. Where else have we? Rob Henry says, Villa have a history of taking a chance on raw talent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But is this the season to take a punt? I think that's a good question that I don't have the answer to. And I don't think anybody has the answer to it. But I think it's a question to leave floating there. Is this the season to take a punt? Like if we were to bring in a Brennan Johnson and a Moussa Diaby, and as I've said before, I'm a big fan of bringing in an old striker, an old head, a wily old fox, put him up there and have him there with an Ollie Watkins or come in instead of an Ollie Watkins, have a rotation there, keep John Duran around the place, bring Cameron Archer in as well. Things look good. Things look good then. You've got options, you've got your winger options of Diaby, Bailey, who I'm putting my pinning my colours to the mast that I don't think he's going anywhere this season. You have when Diet come in there, Philippe Coutinho, who knows if he stays around. I think we're getting a bit top heavy and a bit full in that department as I go down through these players now, unless we forget Jacob Ramsey coming back as well, who will be played on that left-hand side too. You also have John McGinn. What happens to that four-man midfield, that box midfield that Unai Emery got such good fanfare out of last season? So the options would be vast, I suppose, if we were to bring in something like that. But as you say, is this the season to take a punt? It goes back to probably my question that I asked Rob is, or the thing that I posed earlier, that I'd like to see another 6 months of him. But us as Aston Villa, we do not have the luxury of doing that, because if he has a good start to the season again, bigger fish come calling. And unfortunately, while we can snag players from outside the Premier League, the Spurs, the Chelseas, Man Uniteds, Liverpools, Man City even, they can still snag whatever player they want in the Premier League. And it's a reality, I think, that if Villa want to take a chance on Brennan Johnson, and they can see him progress at a level consistently, maybe over a 5-year contract, to get to that level, to get to the level of being a really, really good double-digit striker or winger in the Premier League, they kind of have to take their chance now, I think. And that's the tightrope that I walk on the signing of Brennan Johnson. Simply because we didn't see him in a ball-dominant team. We saw him specifically in a counter-attacking effect with Nottingham Forest. Now, looking at his goals in a vacuum, as I've said before, some of his finishes are brilliant. I know they look like tap-ins, but they're sliding in at the back post. Or, I put it this way: if Trezeguet was scoring them, and he did score them, and we love Trezeguet for those goals, Brennan Johnson scored 8 of them last season. Well, yeah, 8, 2 penalties, and I think he's got an indirect free kick, I think, against Blackburn as well. Anyway, I'm rambling now. Where else are we? Neil Taylor says there's a rumor Forest are interested in Dina, so it could be a deal, but Forest valuation of Johnson is well over the top. To be honest with you, I don't like. It's a buyer's market. It's a seller's market, should I say? Specifically, like, I'll go back to it again. When you have Man City selling players that have never kicked the ball in senior football for 15 million. The market is inflated. These players could go on to become very good players. You saw Romeo Lavia last season. You saw, move to Southampton. He's now being talked about being a £40 million player at Liverpool. So fair play to Southampton for taking the chance there. Now, they also sold, what's your man's name, Dakar Gadi to Leeds for 5 million. That within the Calvin Phillips deal. Also had a lot of games and was as highly thought of as Romeo Lavia. Albeit that I think there's a year between the two of them. But I suppose really it kind of it's yeah, it can be hit and miss with stuff like that. But I think Forest should sell Brennan Johnson for as much as they can get for him. And if that's to us, then fair play. Because as I say, it's we would do the same. We maximised every single penny for Jack Grealish. We don't do it enough with our players. We don't, but we did it with Jack Grealish. And I think every single fan, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm going to retract that. I personally looked at 100 million and said it's too good for us to turn down. Sad and all as I was when he left the club. And he's gone on to look like £100 million player the last season, the season just gone. And he's probably spent 100 million celebrating it in the off season. So I while Forest valuation may be over the top, I've over the last few years um I've stepped away from criticizing teams for trying to squeeze every last penny out of transfers for players, because it's the lifeblood of teams at the moment, and what Forest get there sets them up going into year two in the Premier League, knowing that if they stay for year two and year three, then the FFP then really lengthens for us, like it's done for us this season. It really lengthens for them based on, and they need it based on what they've spent so far. So good point, Daniel. Good point. Um, James Cartwright says he puts Johnson on the same level as Nanto. Both terrific and high potential, but I put my chips on Nanto. Would you? I wouldn't. Of these two players, it would be Brennan Johnson all day long. I think Willie Nanto, I think he broke at the end of last season. I think mentally he broke. I think teams kicked him up and down the field, and I think he's obviously going to get a move this season. It looks like he's going to go to Everton and new surroundings and a new team that doesn't have Big Sam over it, and it doesn't have, maybe has a bit more structure in it, like Sean Dyche team. He could excel in it. And once again, he's only a young kid, so don't get me wrong. But I think at the end of last season, he looked like a young kid who was in a tough spot, that was beginning to learn, okay, I'm coming from the Swiss league here, and teams are going to kick me up and down the field. So I think if you're looking for an impact, or I think Brennan Johnson gives you an impact quicker than Willie Nanto on this team. But it's an interesting point. Interesting point. Very certainly interesting for sure. I'm going to scroll down here a small bit because I think I've missed one or 2 points. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share up my. Oh, Jack says some here. Alex Scott is the guy to buy for me. I've thought that for nearly 2 years. Let me open the can before I answer that one. Alex Scott, great dribbler of the ball from in my view. But you know what I'm going to say here? I think Alex Scott comes to Aston Villa, and I think he sits behind Jacob Ramsey for 2 years, and we're wondering when he's going to get a game. I think we have Alex Scott and Jacob Ramsey, and better than Alex Scott and Jacob Ramsey, because I think Jacob Ramsey is a bit more how will I put it? What's the word I'm looking for? Interchangeable. I think you can play him inside a small bit more. I think you play him outside a small bit more, and he's one of our own, so it costs nothing. But Alex Scott's a good player. Good, don't get me wrong, good player. But I think if we sign him, Jacob Ramsey is there, and he has to get past the Jacob Ramsey, I think, for me. So I would prefer to get a different type of player, a real out and out winger. And Alex Scott is talented. He could play inside. He could play in that number 10 role for sure. But as I say, I think if we were to get a winger to come in here, an out and out proper winger like a Moussa Diaby to come in here, that's why I would allocate my funds. But he's an interesting player, and I'm delighted you brought him up, because he's tantalizing is what he is. And I think he's going to go to Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth will pony up to 25 odd million for him. I think he goes to Bournemouth, and I think we get a look at him in the Premier League there. Let's take a little look. Let's take a little look at Mr. Johnson. So he was linked by John Percy. Once again, before I go into this, we know now at this stage from looking at Twitter, Brennan Johnson's statistics were bad last season outside of goals, but they were bad because he was in a team that were by far and away at the bottom for possession statistics. And if you don't have the ball, your likelihood of having big statistics are going to drop. So just bear that in mind. So his line graphs look like it looks like a dicky ball. Okay, so just bear that one in mind. Well, not this one. Sorry, the next one does. So yeah. So look, when we look at it here, there's a lot of ones in the bottom percentile in all of Europe's top 5 leagues. Once again, you don't get too high with statistics, but statistics can give you a confirmation of what you see. I've seen Brennan Johnson not have a lot of touches in games. I've seen him hug that touchline, and the criticism you could have of him is, why doesn't he get involved a small bit more? Why doesn't he try and force the game? Why doesn't he grab it by the scruff of the neck? And to be honest with you, the answer to that question is, he's 21 bloody years of age and he's a winger, come striker. And it's not like he's 21 years of age and he's playing in the middle of midfield where he can affect the ball every single play. He needs to be fed the ball, I feel. I've no evidence to back that because I've not seen him being fed the ball in the Premier League. But I just get this feeling that if you were to feed him the ball, he's obviously things like his touches, his pass attempts, his progressive passes, all that kind of stuff. With more touches, they go up, because they're just a number. So they're not an extrapolation of over 90 minutes, So it's not an action as such. He's very much dependent on someone passing him the ball to have a touch or to have a pass received. So there's some things that he can't do anything about. And obviously, if you've got less of those, you're going to have less passes attempted and you're going to have less dribbles attempted if you don't have the ball. So I can understand why his statistics are low here. But one of the big ones for me here is his passing completion is 57.6%. And when you look at it in the field, he does give the ball away. I'll come back again with a bit of context in this. A lot of the passes that he makes are crosses as well. Yeah, I'll show you a diagram in a moment with regards to his crosses. Some really good crosses from deep, really whipped ones that he whips in from kind of that Ahmed Al Mohammadi area as well, and he can go to the byline too. So as a winger, didn't get to showcase an awful lot of his creativity, but has got a foot in him that he can wrap his foot around the ball for sure. When we look at it here, he's got one of the things that strikes me is that the areas that he was really good in, as in the amount of getting his shots on target, is really clinical. Ollie Watkins was super clinical as well last season from the point of view of the shots that went on target, should I say. Brennan Johnson doesn't tend to miss a pile of shots. He had some shots saved, took shots from some strange angles. But I'll go back again and I will say that, when he takes a shot, he doesn't need to think about it an awful lot, like we see Ollie Watkins does. He's more instinctual from that point of view. Ball comes into his path, he can take a strike at it and it will go low into the corner. He'll take a strike at it will go high into the corner. He'll be able to dink it past the goalkeeper. He's very instinctual in that. And that's what I come to with clinical. Yeah, like his shot conversion rate, as we can see, do we have it there? Shots on target per 90. We don't have his shot conversion rate there. But I think it's something like its goals per shot is 0.13, which isn't anything really to write home about. We might see it on the next slide. I think we do. So he is clinical. Like when that ball comes to him first time, or when he's to slide in at the back post, he will get it on target, and that's where a lot of his goals came from. So there's a lot of positives in that point of view. But the negative, as I say, is that he didn't affect the game because whether he was told to do it, and you can see it in his heat map, he stood on the sideline. He got chalk in his boots like a real old-fashioned winger, and that can be misconstrued as a negative. And I could be misconstruing that as a negative from that point of view, that he didn't look hungry to come looking at the game. But the context that sometimes I forget as well is 21 years of age, maybe doesn't have that confidence within a team of players that have all been brought in, and again, didn't really know where he fit in within that team, other than the fact that I'm the holdover. I'm the guy that's being started in year two, in the first year in the Premier League, and all the rest of these guys have been brought in over a summer. And that can be difficult for someone as well. So somebody's environment and the dressing room can affect somebody's play and can affect somebody's maybe their psyche of where they fit in within the team. So I'm sure it would have been a massive learning curve for him as well. Uh, 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 uh. Um, Oh, sorry. I thought you guys. There's a couple of people here talking about there's a couple of people talking about dispossessions. Yeah, he's very rarely dispossessed. So if anybody's wondering why his dispossessions are so low there, he's very rarely dispossessed. Leon Bailey is often dispossessed. So having a higher number here is bad. Having a lower number here is good. Just in case, because I saw that going on there in the chat, that people were saying, "Oh, his best statistic is his dispossessions." Yes, he gets dispossessed less than other people. Okay, sorry, just in case that wasn't clear. But Leon Bailey gets dispossessed more than anybody else in the statistic. And for anybody watching or listening to this in the podcast, dispossessions, he gets dispossessed 0.77 times per game per 90 minutes, and that puts him in the top 5% of all wingers in Europe. So he was very rarely dispossessed. So when he got the ball, he held on to it last season. So my mind got drawn to the chat there. So apologies for that change there. Looking at him at how he stacks up against Ollie Watkins and Danny Ings' time at Aston Villa, slightly better indeed. Quite a lot of shots on target. I think I have his shots per 90 are in there. Yeah, so he didn't take an awful lot of shots. Pressed very, very high. He was a really good presser. Remember what I said? If he plays that support striker with Ollie Watkins, pressing defenses won't be any issue to him. His ball recoveries were quite impressive. It was better than anybody we had in the team as well there. But didn't score very frequently for all the minutes he played. Yes, he had eight goals. He scored once in every 368 minutes. And chances missed. He missed very few chances, only 7 chances there. Big chances over the course of the season. So didn't have an awful lot of shots, didn't miss many big chances, scored 8 goals that kept the team up. So context is king when we look at the statistics here. And while they don't make like massive reading here, you have to bear them in conversation with the amount of times they touched the ball, which was a lot less than the guys that we're looking at here. So that does affect an awful lot of the statistics here. Because if you don't have the ball, you can't do much. And that's why I've reservations on him. And that's why my concerns is will we see him as somebody who's confident being a ball dominant player? I think we will, but I would like to see it before I spend 60 million or 50 million on him. Crosses, he had 1.78 crosses per game last season, which was quite high. And as I say, he was dispossessed very, very infrequently last season. Quite an accomplished dribbler of the ball. Pretty decent dribbling statistics. Like the reason that his successful dribble percentage is low is because he took very, very few dribbles per game. But when you watch him play, you can see that he can dribble the ball. Does look like at times that he's got a heavy touch. That's I think a lot of that is to do with youth. But as I say, he's definitely somebody that that can improve in that area. Some little notes that I've written about him, specifically about his defensive contributions, are, in terms of his defensive duties, Johnson's role doesn't always demand constant physical exertion, so he doesn't need to be running around the place all the time. He's very good at positioning himself effectively, balances getting in the way of transitional plays, cutting out passing lanes, maintaining access to specific players, and he helps to create traps. So he moves in certain areas to try and get people to pass back in field, where the Nottingham Forest players then were able to swarm in their defence and have more opportunity to win back the ball and set up a counter attack when the ball came in the middle of midfield. And Brennan Johnson was good at that because he would press that right back or that left back, should I say, and force them to come back in field when then the attack dogs would come and get them as well. With regards to his finishing as well, he's got some really good close control at times. His dribbling, his first touch is quite good. It's not elite, but it's quite good. His ability to receive the ball comfortably from an array of passing types significantly benefits the team. He's adept at controlling lofted passes as well. So that was one of the things I saw, crosses coming in, right in, overhit crosses to the back post. He was very good at almost anticipating those. If it seemed like it was a tactic that he would peel off the defender and be there for an overhit cross that was done on purpose. And he dealt with those really well. There was no silly swipes at the ball. He was able to take them down, recycle the ball, or have shots at times as well. Decent cushion touch on him as well. Most of his goals were first time efforts. Crosses that came in, connections with crosses, or balls that dropped him in the box. Having an astute strike at the ball as opposed to swipe at the ball. There's a difference between a strike and a swipe, and like he always looked like he knew where he was putting the ball. He's an accomplished finisher in trickier parts of the box, like wider angles. We'll see that in a moment. And he's particularly proficient at hitting the bottom left-hand corner from locations on the right half space or the right-hand side of the box. So he's very good at going across the goalkeeper low, essentially, is what I'm getting at there. He's known for an ability to attack space more so than to attack to drive directly at players. He attacks that space, gets into that space, as most 21-year-olds do. He's yet to kind of really develop a trick, I think, but he knows he's pacey and he knows that he can get around players. And at 21, 22, that's fine. I'd like to see him develop a trick as he goes forward as well. He does have a bit of a heavy touch. Sometimes it seems like Kevin Kilban's bag of trick, we used to call it here in Ireland, instead of a bag of tricks. He had a bag of trick because he only had one, and his trick was to make it look like he had miscontrolled the ball, but it was a specific heavy pass, and then he'd just turn on the afterburners and get around players playing for the Irish national team. So I'm not saying that he's Kevin Kilban, but sometimes it does look like he's had a heavy touch, but a lot of the time he plays it in space to run onto it himself. You be the judge of whether it's a heavy touch or not. I can't say for certain. I'm being generous with him when I say that it's not a heavy touch from that point of view. He runs very kind of upright like a sprinter. When you watch him, he doesn't run like John McGinn with his head down, his arse up. He run like John McGinn runs like a jockey when he runs around the place, whereas Johnson runs upright. He kind of his chest is out and he runs upright, and that allows him. He's been taught to run. Is what I'm getting at here. He's not a natural speedster. It looks like he's been taught to. Well, he's obviously a natural speedster, but he's been taught how to utilize that speed. He's got an upright running style. He looks around the field. He does scan the field an awful lot, but and I think that works because it worked for Newcastle or for Nottingham Forest last season because he didn't have an awful lot of the ball, so he needed to look for opportunities. And again, that goes back to one of my concerns that I mentioned, because I don't know whether it is even a concern or whether it's something that, once again, if he's in a team that has more of the ball, do we not see more of this? Do we not see him? Does he not hide away from the play more? If the team he's with has the ball more, is the reason that he hugged the touchline to be able to spot frailties within the, like, you can see him looking around the whole time. That's brilliant. He's not a head down runner. He's not Milan Barras, where he runs with his head down into it and realizes, oh crap, I'm a foot away from the end line. I've got to do something now. He runs with his head up and he scans the field. And I'm wondering, was he utilizing that to try and maybe see areas that pockets he could get into, but just wasn't good enough or wasn't able to process it fast enough in his first year in the Premier League to get into those pockets. Be interesting to see, but I couldn't say for certain. So let's take a little look here. So these are the goals he scored last season for Nottingham Forest. So predominantly with his right foot. The teams that he scored against were Wolves, Everton. He got 2 against Everton. Scored against Leeds, 2 against Leicester. Scored 2 against Blackburn Rovers in the League Cup. He scored against Bournemouth and he scored against Everton as well. So they're the teams that he scored against. I want to draw your attention to his shot map up here, and you can see the goals that he scored are the blue markers here. So they're also denoted by goals that he should have scored and goals that he shouldn't have scored. So a lot of them are here and around the 6-yard box that we can see, and they are ones whereby he had to get in front of defenders and get first touch kind of scores on them. We've got one tiny little blue dot right here on the edge of the area. You guys will remember that goal he scored, I'd imagine. I don't remember who it was, but he banged it in the top corner. But a lot of the goals that he got then, the other goals he got came from the right-hand side of the box, where he had to be good with his positioning of the ball or placement of the ball in the area. So he is a clinical striker. When he gets an opportunity at goal to have a first-time strike, he instinctively knows how to find that bottom corner or to angle it away from the goalkeeper. So we've criticized strikers that we have. We criticize Ollie Watkins at the moment for hitting it directly at the goalkeeper. Brennan Johnson seems to instinctively know to get it to either side of him. And that's something from a 21-year-old that I'd like to see more of, because if that is innate in his ability to be able to do it, well, then that's fantastic. That's a win-win situation, I think, for both him and for anyone else. The bottom right-hand corner here, the penalty area deliveries, you'll see the majority of them are from the right-hand side, and you'll see where they're delivered from. Just right on the edge of that final third. Quick crosses to try and get in behind the back of players, and also he's able to go to the byline and cross the ball in there as well. So he's a varied style of a varied ability to be able to cross the ball in from different lengths, should I say, out from the field as well. Going to do a little bit of a quiz here for everybody. So last season, these are the statistics of a player last season. I had a blurb written here and I can't remember what it is, but it hasn't shown up in the slide. So this is a player, quite a prominent player, English player that played last season and got a big move. And he was heavily criticized last year for not getting on the ball an awful lot, for not being able to complete passes at a relevant rate, for not Rico 66. You might know who this person is because this is his 2021 2022 statistics, but he was criticized for not getting on the ball, not having a decent pass completion rate, and not affecting the game outside of outside of really good runs. But he had decent defensive ability. Got a big move. Anyone want to guess at who this player is? Anyone want to guess at who we're looking at on the field? No, this is Brent Yates. It's a young player, but it's not Ashley Young, if that's who you're talking about. So this player is, because I haven't seen anyone put it in here, these are the statistics that got Anthony Gordon a move from Everton to Newcastle for whatever it was, 50 million. And the reason I put that out there is, and it's a question that I don't know the answer to, is there similarities in the season that Anthony Gordon had for Everton before he moved to Newcastle? Take away what happened to Anthony Gordon at Newcastle this season, where he could barely get in the field. I think he'd only something like 500 or 600 minutes. He's gone to the under-21 tournament this year, had a brilliant tournament, and in some areas he was named as player of the tournament, by some publications. I'm just going to leave you guys on that one, because as I say, for all of you out there who are determined, determined is the wrong answer, but are determining the cost of Brennan Johnson based on whether Aston Villa should weighing up whether they should sign him. I genuinely believe Newcastle were in the same situation last year with Anthony Gordon, and Newcastle couldn't afford to wait to see if in 6 months' time he had elevated his play to another level, because I think the likes of Spurs would have signed him. I think other teams would have come in for him. And are we in the same position that Newcastle are in at this moment in time to take a chance? Is it the same chance that we would take if we were to take a chance? And I say chance lightly. I'm not saying that Brennan Johnson won't do it for Aston Villa. Don't get me wrong. It's just a question I'm asking. Is it a similar type situation? Fire it into the comments. I don't usually do this all. Pop your answers in the comments here and I'll come back to them later on when the whole thing is over. I don't usually do that. And that wasn't me slagging anybody, but I watched YouTube in different areas and stuff like that on completely different things, and everyone seems to say it, and I usually never say it. So, but as I say, is it a similar situation? Mull that one over and let me know what you think. Nigel Franklin asked me, would I pay 50 million for Gordon now, Neil? Seriously, no. But that's what I'm saying. Would I pay 50 million for him? I was speaking previously in the podcast about if we take the money out of it and if we take a look at a longer term vision of signing somebody now and taking a chance on him now, so that if we really think that in 3 years' time he could really hit his stride, which clubs do look at that extrapolation, Villa can't afford to wait for that 6 months. This is my biggest argument with signing Brennan Johnson. I personally would like to wait for another 6 months to see him and to see if he can do it again in the Premier League for another just over another shorter period of time. I think Newcastle were in the same area last season with Anthony Gordon, and they felt they had to take a chance, but they didn't buy Anthony Gordon for this season. Just gone. They've bought Anthony Gordon for the 5 years of his contract because they know he's a young player who had limitations, who's going to have to grow. And Anthony Gordon, as I said, has gone on to go to the under-21s this season, and we'll see what this year holds for him. So I'm just wondering, is it an interesting? To me, it's an interesting correlation. Some of you guys may think I'm bonkers, but just thought it was an interesting one. Anyway, I am done. That's 45 minutes on Brennan Johnson that I didn't think I would do. But you guys brought some really, really good questions. I like the start of it there where I got your comments and I spoke to them. If you guys want to do that in future, we will absolutely do that. But all in all, my views on Brennan Johnson, the talent, the raw talents that he has, what he does well, he does really, really well. I would like to see more of it, and I would like to see him in a more ball dominant team, as I say, so that he could up the statistics with regards to is 8 goals his ceiling? Is he a counter attacking player only? There are questions I think that still are going to need answering within the Premier League, and it'll be interesting to see what happens to him over the course of the season. But talented player, and I think somebody will sign him. If not now, they will sign him in January. But watch this space, I suppose, with it. Nothing may come of it. Anyway, thanks very much, everybody, for watching. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. If you are listening back to this in the audio podcast, I'm going to ask again for the nearly 6,000 followers that we have on YouTube. Even if you don't listen to us on an audio podcast, if you just subscribe to us in the audio podcast, that just helps us in the algorithms there. For those who only listen to audio, not everybody watches YouTube. That would be great if you could do that. Costs you nothing, doesn't even clog up your phone with anything. If you just subscribe to us on Apple Podcast or on Spotify, it really, really helps us. It costs you absolutely nothing. Also on the YouTube's machine, if you can subscribe to us there, if you're not already subscribed, I really, really appreciate it. But thank you so much. I think Paddy might be jumping on tomorrow because we're going to do a team sheet tantrum, provided I don't have an actual tantrum going on inside with my kids. We're going to do a team sheet tantrum tomorrow. I am spending the morning. I'm taking my little girl on a train tomorrow morning because she's now infatuated with trains. So I'm really looking forward to that. When I come back, I'm hoping to do a team sheet tantrum, provided that I can get away from inside tomorrow. Tomorrow is our first game against Walsall, so I hope to see you guys all here. Look out on the social media for what time we'll start with the team sheet tantrum. As you guys know, 10 minutes before the teams are announced, which is usually done an hour before the game. But with tomorrow being a kind of one of those weird kind of tune-up games. I remember last year we were waiting for like 40 minutes for the team sheet to be announced, but we will go live before the game and we will discuss any team sheet news that we get. Myself and Paddy tomorrow. Well, definitely me. Maybe Paddy will join, and we'd love to see you there again. Thanks very much, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday. Stay safe, stay healthy, and all that's left to say is up the Villa.